this one. I don't have my notes. I'll give it a go. Hang on, let me dig it up in here so I can see if I can make it. Get this round the right way. Hypotonic is more carb, less volume. I think. Osmolality less than body tissue. Okay. So here, when it's hypotonic, I believe that means you've got more solute here than in the intestine. I think that's the right way around. And so in my head, I think it's another high-low idea. That if I've got more solute here, then water moves out of the intestine and into the stomach, into the bloodstream, into the body, right? So if I'm taking in a drink, the carb level can be important. If I've got the reverse scenario where I have more sodium out here, then the water moves into the intestine. And so you don't want that to occur if I'm taking in a drink. You want to make sure that the carbohydrate level and the electrolyte level in the drink is good enough to make sure the water is moving out of the stomach and into the body. So I'll try and look at that a bit more closely, and then when we do the review session for this exam, I'll see if I can go through that in a little more, make a little more sense on it. Okay? All right, so let's see. Need that box. Okay, so proteins that the video was covering, right? Then a couple of things to be careful of. You don't want to have more than 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Is once you get to 2 grams per kilogram, then you're starting to possibly impact kidney health and things. So when you're looking at that 10 to 35%, you've also got to look at how much carbohydrate, how much protein is that for the size of the person, right? And for most people, supplementation of protein isn't necessary. In our culture, we eat a lot of protein in our culture, way too much protein. So for the majority of people, if you're going to be a PE teacher or you're going to be a personal trainer, then it's unlikely that someone you're working with is going to need supplementation, additional protein in their diet unless they're a vegetarian. And then that can get a bit tricky for vegetarians, particularly if they're vegan, because making sure they're getting enough protein in that kind of a diet can be problematic sometimes. Right? This is not the right. This is. You got back at the end, how about that? It isn't quite a line. It's not the proof. laughing at me for now? This is
laughing at him.
You're laughing at him.
Charlie.
I'm sorry.
Can't find that adapter.
Do you see the snow outside, Dr. Wall?
I know.
I know.
It's amazing.
It's
I'm
like
so excited.
it's like a perfect day to take a break.
So excited. Snowing. All right.
Guess not. Never mind.
All right. So third macronutrient is fats, lipids, triglycerides. So lipids, fats are the same thing. Triglycerides are the storage form of fat in the body, right? So when we look at storage in fat cells or storage in muscle tissue, then that's in the form of triglycerides. Less than 30% total calorie intake, preferably, right? And you want 10% or less than 10% to be saturated. So we'll come back to that idea in a minute. If you're looking at RDA, it's 65 grams per day or less. Alright. The RDAs are based on a sedentary person, so generally as an athlete you're going to take in more than that. But your entire calorie consumption would be much larger than a sedentary person anyway. Right? And we've got to have fats available, so no fat isn't an option. Right? And that's an important idea sometimes to hang on to when you're working with the general population, because once they've got the idea that fat is bad for them, then we tend to go to an extreme and go, oh, well, then I won't eat any fat. That's not a good plan, right? You need it for your nails. I've seen people who have eating disorders and won't eat fats and things, literally be able to pale their nails. You can literally just strip, right? Hair goes flat, hair goes blank. All our cell membranes are double lipid membranes, right? So a double lipid membrane then would require fat. So you can't have no fat. And when we are thinking about trying to build muscle mass, for example, we need fats to make steroid hormones, to make testosterone, and I can't build muscle if I haven't got testosterone available. Right? It's the anabolic steroids. So without my own testosterone available, it's really hard to maintain muscle or grow muscle. Right? Fats are a great source of energy. They've got 9 kilocalories per gram, about 9 kilocalories per gram. Proteins and carbs only have 4 kilocalories per gram. Right? So more than double the amount of energy available in a fat than in a carb or a protein. So that makes them really useful. They've got lots and lots of carbons, so once they're broken down, they can stimulate lots and lots of cycles of Krebs and dump a load of hydrogen into the electron transport chain, and we get tons of energy. Right? So fats are a really useful source of energy, and when you're at rest, when you're doing low intensity activity, they're going to be the primary source. You're not going to use a lot of them at that intensity level, but they're mostly what you're using when you're sitting in class. And as I said, we store them in fat cells and in other tissues, particularly in muscle. If you buy a nice marbled steak, right, the marbling is the fat. So we're the same. We store fat in our muscle cells. And in where we have fat stored, we have an enzyme called lipase. Lipase is responsible for facilitating the breakdown of the triglyceride. So triglyceride is the storage form, but the form that we use as an energy source is free fatty acids. So we have to break that triglyceride down initially so that we've got the form we want for energy production. And the fatty acids, as we've just said, major substrate for rest, low intensity, so if I'm just walking around the shops, or if I'm strolling with the dog rather than walking briskly with the dog, we're going to be using fats as our energy source. One of the problems with fats is that they, even at a moderate intake of fat, you see the risk of quite substantial weight gains. And at high intakes of fat, you've really got weight gain almost certainly going on because we don't use it enough as an energy source. And if I'm overweight, then that increases blood pressure and it increases cardiovascular risk. And so that's why fats kind of have a bit of a bad name, but you want to be careful that you don't cut them down too far. So we'll have a look that too few can be bad as well. So we've got fatty acids. We're going to split our fats into two subgroups. We have what we think of as the good fats, so unsaturated, monosaturated, polyunsaturated. They're our unsaturated good. Good doesn't mean I can eat as much of them as I want. Good means that if I'm going to make fat choices, I want them to be more unsaturated than saturated. Right? So in my diet, I want 10% or less of saturated, but I'm looking at 30% or less fat. So we want to make the majority of our fat intake unsaturated. Right? For mono-unsaturated olives, olive oil, great source. Canola and peanut oils, I don't like cooking with those, they flavor the food too much, but that's a personal preference. Avocados are a great source of fats, of healthy fats. And then other nuts, seeds, and other types of vegetable oils are also good sources for polyunsaturated. Sunflower oil, if you use a sunflower spread, those are polyunsaturated. And then omega-3s and omega-6 fatty acids are, I think you'll read quite a lot about those in the literature at the moment. They're kind of fashionable right now, but they have been shown to give very substantial health benefits, right? And they're not stored, they're not produced by the body. I don't make these from other nutrients that I take in. So we have to make sure that we're including them in our diet. Sunflower and soy are both good sources of omega-3 and 6. Fish, particularly fatty fishes, so salmon, trout. Tuna less so because tuna is less fatty, but I believe it does provide some. Yeah, but tinned salmon is a great source of omega-3s and 6s. And they're linked with decreased cardiovascular risk, some kinds of cancers, prostate cancer, breast cancer. There's another one, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Right? The saturated fats are what we consider to be bad fats. So when we look at studies about this, it gets a little bit tricky because saturated fats generally are, that's our red meat, our steak, our whole milk, those kind of animal products are high in saturated fats. And so it gets a bit tricky when you look at the literature because when I eat a lot of red meat, I'm also increasing my calorie intake generally. So it's difficult to tease out, is the risk because of the meat and the fat, or is the risk because of the gain in weight? Right? Generally, the guidelines suggest that you try to take most of your protein as chicken or fish or beans and nuts, because they have a higher level of the unsaturated fats. And eat red meat, but eat it occasionally rather than every day.
What about eggs? Take out the yolk.
I wouldn't take out the yolk personally. Egg whites don't have any, minimal fat. I would not take out the egg yolk. It's got lots of goodies, and it's the bit that tastes good. So I'm not a big fan. Egg white omelets.
They're good.
The bodybuilders used to eat egg white omelets, and nasty. It doesn't matter what you put in it to make it taste nice. It's nasty. I'm sorry. Eat the whole egg. Just eat less of them. I think that would always be my approach. Or balance it somewhere else. Let's see, what else did I want to say here? So the link between saturated fats and increased cardiovascular disease is relatively well established in the literature. Most authorities are going to say that that link exists. As I say, it's a little bit tricky because you've got the increase in weight generally as well at the same time. But we want to limit that type of fat if we can. Now, having said that, you can go too low. So again, you've got to be a little bit careful when you're looking at these percentages within our diet. If we say fat should be less than or equal to 30%, then I can have 5% fat in my diet and meet the guideline, right? The problem is 5% fat is almost not enough to keep you healthy. So too low a fat intake is also has negative health outcomes. So one of the ones that as an athlete you would be the most concerned about is that if I don't provide enough fat, then I can't make testosterone. And if I can't make testosterone, I can't synthesize muscle. So that makes it difficult to maintain muscle mass that you have. And if you're trying to build muscle mass, that's going to start to become tricky, right? So you've got to make sure that you have a good balance. For strength athletes, when you're looking at this testosterone concept, the recommendation is 15 to 20% of your diet should be fats, right? So if you can make, if we take this ratio, 30 to 10, we've got a 1 to 2 ratio, right? So if I take that here, then I would make 5% of my diet saturated, 10% of my diet unsaturated. Okay. But we want to get away from the idea that lower is better, because it's only better to a point, and then it will start to be detrimental, right? So hopefully in the video lecture I went over high protein diets. I'm pretty sure I did. So when you're looking at that information, have a look at the impact of high protein diets with resistance training and high protein diets with aerobic training, endurance training. All right, what are the benefits? What are the problems? What about high-fat diet? So I believe that a high-fat diet would be anything over 55%. Whoops. So 55, maybe up to as high as 85% of the diet is fat. That's ghastly. It's really, really not good for your health. Plus, think about percentage, right? I can only have 100%. So if 85% of my diet is fat, I've got 15% left for carbohydrate and protein. There is no way you can be healthy on that diet. It's impossible. All right? Even at 55, you're severely limiting carbohydrate and protein intake because of the amount of your diet that is fat. Right? So it's bad plan. Not a good plan. So there have been some high-fat diets out there. The Atkins diet is a low-carb, high-fat protein diet. And theoretically, all right, if I feed my body a certain type of food, my body is going to adapt to using that kind of food a little better. Right? Theoretically. And so the argument for having a high-fat diet is that I'm going to adapt to using fat as my major energy source, which provides glycogen sparing for the end of the race. So I'm going to switch to fat earlier maybe. I'm going to use more fat as energy. I'm not going to use so much of my stored carbohydrate. And then when I want to sprint at the end of the race, I've got loads of carbohydrate left. Right? So I can start sprinting a little bit sooner and get ahead of everybody. So that's kind of the argument, I think, that people use for a high-fat diet. When you look at the literature, though, we've got some pretty mixed results. So it kind of depends upon the timeline and also depends upon what kind of activity you're doing. So in short-term studies, so if I do this high-fat diet for 5 days, 4 or 5 days, then all we see are negative impacts on performance. Right? It's not enough time for your body to adapt to eating it, and so what we see is slower long distance times and even inability to maintain force production and things for a more high intense exercise program. Right? So if you're doing interval training or things like that, where you're not going to just use ATP-PC, you would use glycolysis, we see some impact on that as well. And the impact can be pretty dramatic. Right? If you slow down 30% of your race time, right? So that's not good. The long-term studies, though, when you look at what happens if I eat a high-fat diet for longer than a week, we see some mixed results there. The results seem to be split depending upon what the activity is that you're trying to do. So if I'm doing moderate intensity work, so if I'm working at less than 80% heart rate max, then there are some data that suggests you might see a slightly improved performance. If I'm working at higher intensity, if I'm working over 80%, then we still see decreases in performance. So there's a little bit of a suggestion that in the data that if I ate a high-fat diet for a long time and I'm doing the kind of activity where I'm working at 70, 75%, intensity, that I might see a bit of improvement in performance. On the other hand, you are hugely increasing health risk. So you've got to really understand what you're doing and consider the trade-off. Is the extra 2 seconds worth having a heart attack in 10 years' time? Okay? Really, truly. And that's generally a problem with athletes anyway, right? The reason we see athletes take steroids and growth hormones and all these other things that we clearly know are not healthy in the long term is because we look in the short term. Winning is very important. Right? And we go, well, when I stop taking them, then I'll be okay. Right? But that isn't always the case, and it's certainly not the case. Once you've done the damage to your arteries and you've done the damage to your heart, you're not undoing that damage when you go back to not eating a high-fat diet. Right? So you got to really, when you go out in the world and you start to get bombarded by the media or by articles about protein supplements or different new fad diets that come in, do your homework. Really look at what is the immediate benefit, what are the possible long-term negative, and am I willing to take that risk, right? Right now, the literature on nutrition, particularly in sport, is changing like every week, you know. Just even looking through this chapter in your version of the textbook, there is tons more information on protein supplements and branched chain amino acids and other things that they're putting into. There is a lot more info in that chapter than there was in the previous edition. And the previous edition was only 4 years old now, 4 or 5 years old. Right? So sport nutrition is a rapidly evolving area of research, and we're going to learn a lot about it. Really, truly, if you are not a top-class competitive athlete, and Division II athletes are, right? If you are looking at anything lower than that, you don't need to pay any attention to diets, supplements. In my view, if you eat a balanced diet and you follow the rules, you will have what you need to fuel your performance in your training. Okay? All this information is, I really believe this, and I am not, right, this is not my specialty. LB probably knows way more about this stuff than I do. Wouldn't surprise me at all, right? But if I eat a healthy, balanced diet, then most people are going to get everything they need. As long as I balance the calories to my work output, if I divide the calories up the way the guidelines suggest, I'm going to get everything I need to do what I want to do. Okay. So, macronutrients, carbs, proteins, fats. Micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. They're micro because we need itty-bitty, teeny-weeny amounts of them every day. Does not mean they are not important. They're hugely important. If we don't get the ones we need on a regular basis, we can get sick very quickly, right? And you sure as heck are going to see an impact on performance quite quickly, right? So just because they're micro doesn't mean we don't want to pay attention to them. Right? So vitamins are, facilitate enzyme reactions. So, for example, there are certain vitamins that help us make ATP. If they're not there, we make ATP more slowly. The enzyme doesn't work as effectively, right? Some of them have a recommended daily allowance. Some of them have what we call an AI number, so that's an adequate intake. And some of them, sometimes you'll see UL, which is the tolerable upper limit for most people. So you should never take more than that amount. Right? If I take more, then there are some health risks involved. Right? Moderation. Stick with moderation in everything.
Your body will just keep it off.
Some of them, you will. Some of them can be toxic. All right. So we have again another easy two subdivision. Right. Vitamins are either fat soluble or water soluble. They're literally what they say. Right. If they are fat soluble, when we eat them, if we don't have enough stored, we're able to absorb them and store them in our fat cells. That means, since if you go back to early in the semester, even a lean person has a lot of fat in their body. So we're able to store these vitamins in large quantities. That means I can go a day or two without them if I need to. Right? So vitamins A, D, E, and K are all fat soluble. That means I can overdose on them. Right? I can take too much of them and be at a toxic level. So I've seen a young lady who was anorexic, and the only things she would eat were carrots, oranges. That was it. Couldn't get her to eat anything else. And eventually, she had so much vitamin A as a precursor, right? So if I'm eating oranges and carrots, I'm getting lots of vitamin A. Eventually, the palms of her hands turned orange. Like she was storing so much fat in her body that her body was starting to turn orange, carotene, okay? So you can develop toxic levels, so you've got to be a bit careful with these. You don't want to overdose on these types of vitamins. Water-soluble vitamins, on the other hand, yes, sir?
How long would I have to take in order to activate the
To be toxic?
Yeah, to be toxic.
I don't know that it's a length of time rather than an amount of what you're taking. So you can take a multivitamin that has A, D, E, and K in it every day because they've only got a little amount. I'm not overdosing on it. Does that make sense? It's the amount. So, I'm not a nutritionist. I suspect the answer will be something boring like it depends upon the individual and it's all highly individual. And the girl I knew, that was when I was in school, had probably been eating mostly carrots and oranges. Actually, orange. She was just absolutely. That girl could eat oranges. It was amazing. That probably was maybe 3 months in, 2 months in to her starting her diet.
Was it like 5 oranges a day? 1 orange a day?
Well, I only saw her at school, and she was putting away probably 5 or 6. It was pretty insane, yeah.
That's crazy.
It's a lot. I mean, you've got to take a lot of this for it to be toxic, right? You just want to be careful that we don't get into that mindset of more is better, right? If I take 1 multivitamin and that's good for me, should I take 3 multivitamins a day? Because that'll be even better for me, right? Because more is always better. That's where you want to be careful. It's okay to take the recommended amount. You don't want to take more than the recommended amount. Right? Now, water soluble is a different kettle of fish because they're literally that. They are water soluble. So they dissolve in water. That means I can't store them. And that means I have to have a very regular supply of them. All right? So B vitamins, B vitamin complex, and vitamin C are both water soluble. One of the things you want to watch for there then is if you choose to take a vitamin C supplement, be thoughtful about what you're taking, okay? Because vitamin C, again, the manufacturers like to get your money. Okay? You've got to start being, I know I'm a cynic, but you've got to start being a little more cynical. Right? They want you to buy 1 gram tablets of vitamin C, and they tell you vitamin C is very good for you and it helps you fight colds and blah, 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 blah. So take this 1 gram. You can't use 1 gram of vitamin C. You are going to go to the loo and pee your money down the toilet, right? Because it's water soluble. So unless you're using it, it's going down the loo, right? So buy your 1 gram tablets if you want to. Break them in half. Just take a half at a time. And then you'll use more of it and you won't waste your money. Same with B vitamins. Be a little careful about taking additional B vitamins because if you have enough B vitamins in the food source that you're eating, those extra B vitamins are just going to be a waste of your money. So just it's very, 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 very difficult to get to toxic levels of vitamin C. You would have to go insane to get to toxic levels on vitamin C. So, we know a lot about a lot of vitamins. The book, because we're doing sport and exercise, the book concentrates on the research that we know about vitamins that are related to performance. And so vitamin C is important in immune function. There's some argument about that statement, but generally it's considered a useful vitamin for supporting immune function. If you look at the health and wellness and nutrition literature, there's some argument about, does it help stop you getting the cold? Or does it only help you get better from the cold quicker? So I think probably the latter. I think if you're going to get the cold, you're going to get the cold. Right? If you're exposed to the virus, you're going to get the virus. How quickly do I recover from the virus? Maybe linked. It's really a little murky at the moment. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. That means it counteracts free radicals, which are the bad guys floating around in our body. And we get free radicals from the environment we're in. So if we don't live in a healthy environment, we may be breathing in substances that break into free radicals in the body. But one of the interesting things about exercise is exercise creates tons of free radicals in your body. So we're doing something that is considered healthy, but we're making all these bad substances that break down cells and do a lot of cellular damage inside our bodies. So you want to, let's do this over here. You want to pay a little bit of attention to the stress-exercise relationship, right? Because what we see is quite interesting, particularly, I think, if you are a top-class athlete, right? Because this is what we see. Okay? So this is exercise. And that could be a combination of volume, duration, intensity, right? And this is immune function. Okay? So, if I'm a sedentary person, or I am low active, then what we tend to see in those individuals, typically on average, we see quite low, poor immune function. So these people get sick a lot, they don't feel good, right? They're much more susceptible to picking up any bugs that are around, okay? So this is low. Here's my moderate person. So if I exercise moderately, so I do my 30 minutes every day or my 45 minutes every day, and I exercise 6 times a week and I take a day off every week, or if I don't take a day off one week, I make sure I take a day off the next week, right? I do things in moderation. I run for an hour, I don't run for 5 hours, right? Then what we see in that population is big benefits to immune function. Right? So moderate exercise hugely supports immune function. I'm less likely to get sick. I'm going to be able to maintain my training program on a more regular basis. Right? This is a big, nice, plus, smiley, happy picture. Right? Then we go to you guys. And you're all the way over here, most of you, right? So what we see with high-level athletes is that generally they work so hard, so often, that they impact immune function again. And so this population now becomes more at risk of catching colds, chest infections, stomach bug, whatever's going around. Right? So how many times, think about your athletic careers, how many times was training going really, really, really well and you were working really, really, really hard, and then right at the absolute worst time possible, you got a cold, or you caught the tummy bug that was going around campus. And then you have to take a week off, and then you got to start the whole damn thing all over again, right? So, because of this, because you guys tend to not be moderate, you tend to work out hard, you work out most days, if not every day, you're not very good at remembering to take a day off and just chill out, right? So, vitamin C may combat oxidative stress in the muscles. So there's some literature out there that suggests that vitamin C aids recovery because I don't see as much damage in the muscle from the ROS if I'm taking a vitamin C supplement. Right? The literature is evolving in this area, so we'll find out more, and therefore there's some impact maybe on DOMS. So again, there's a little bit of literature that suggests I'm not going to be as sore if I've got the vitamin C because I don't see so much damage occurring at the cellular level in the muscle tissue. However, so it might help with recovery, it doesn't actually seem to improve how well I can work. So I don't see faster times because I take a vitamin C supplement. Right? The impact isn't on the performance, on the capacity, the impact is on, possibly on recovery, which would indirectly possibly impact performance, but there's not a direct link, okay? And there's also literature, just to confuse the picture, and this is what I mean, it's evolving. It might help with injury, but if I take too much of it, it might promote cellular damage. So, the literature on nutrition in sport is really irritating right now. I think we're at that stage where we're learning a lot, but we don't quite know enough. Yes, sir?
Do water-soluble vitamins fuel metabolic pathways? I read that in the book, fuel the...
It wouldn't fuel it. I think maybe the link would be the fact that there are certain vitamins that facilitate enzyme reaction. So, and I don't know enough to know whether it's water-soluble ones or fat-soluble. I just know vitamins can facilitate enzyme reactions, and therefore that would impact energy production. Let's see. Okay, vitamin E, where are we? We've got a couple of minutes?
No.
No minutes?
I don't think so.
Oh. All right, let me just come back to this quickly for 1 minute because I forgot to tell you this. Coming back to this idea here, just in case you think I'm barking mad, right? When they measure marathon runners, immune function in a marathon runner is suppressed for anywhere up to 2 weeks after the end of the race. And it's particularly low for the first couple of hours after the race. So if you ever run a marathon, you know, when you get to the end of the marathon, everyone's crowding around and patting you on the back and coughing you. Get out of there as quick as you can, because you're way more likely to catch a chest infection at the end of the race. Or if you're going back to your hotel room and hide for a few hours and then come out and celebrate. All right? Okay, we'll pick up with vitamin E on Monday. We'll finish